You download the apps, memorize the conjugation tables, and drill the vocabulary flashcards with intense, deliberate focus. Yet, after 2 years of disciplined daily study, trying to order a basic cup of coffee in Paris still leaves you sweating through your shirt. The standard explanation handed down by educators and language software companies is that your adult brain has hardened and the critical biological window for acquisition has permanently closed. But the evidence suggests we are looking at a system operated against its own design, where intelligent adults are adopting a broken model and then blaming their own biology when it fails. Consider a toddler. Before their 4th birthday, they absorb the most complex communication system on Earth from raw audio. They do this in roughly 36 months, with 0 textbooks, quizzes, or explicit instruction. Your brain never lost that physical capacity to acquire language. What it lost, or rather what it buried under 30 years of accumulated habit, is the willingness to operate in the correct mode. Classroom instruction forces you into a mode of processing that runs in direct opposition to the evolutionary design of your neural machinery. This diagram breaks down the 2 distinct cognitive modes at play here. On the left is implicit learning, fluid, unconscious, and driven by statistics. On the right is explicit learning, rigid, conscious, and entirely rule-based. A toddler relies exclusively on the implicit system. Their brain acts as a prediction machine, extracting patterns from the raw audio they hear without ever stopping to analyze the syntax. An adult in a classroom relies on the explicit system. You use conscious effort to painstakingly stack rule upon rule. But in cognitive science, the blocking effect reveals that explicit learning actively interferes with implicit acquisition. When you consciously learn a rule, you create a cognitive structure that occupies the same neural territory needed for pattern recognition. Studying grammar to speak a language is a biological paradox. It is the neurological equivalent of trying to learn to ride a bicycle by studying the differential equations of rotational balance. We have concrete evidence for this interference in neuroimaging studies conducted over the last 30 years. When a native speaker processes a sentence, the activity lights up the left temporal lobe. This is the seat of automatic, unconscious pattern matching. But when a non-native speaker, trained on grammar, hears that same sentence, the activation shifts instead to the prefrontal cortex, the machinery of conscious, effortful, and fragile rule application. The most significant finding is that more grammar practice does not shift your brain's activity back toward the native temporal lobe. It only reinforces the wrong cognitive pathway. Years of grammar study make you highly efficient at a process that will never lead to native-like fluency in the real world. The alternative is to trigger your brain's natural machinery through what researchers call comprehensible input. This involves engaging with content where you already understand roughly 60 to 70% of what is happening. You listen for the story, the argument, or the joke, ignoring the linguistic form entirely. To keep the implicit system online, this must happen in a low-stakes environment, free from the pressure of grades or social evaluation. When you are anxious, your amygdala generates a stress response that floods the prefrontal cortex with cortisol, effectively taking the implicit learning system offline. You only need 20 minutes a day to feed this process. Your brain consolidates those patterns during sleep, moving them into long-term storage. Consistency is the only requirement. If gaps exceed 24 hours, the consolidation process works with decaying data. Your job is to create these daily conditions. Once you show up and provide the data, your brain's architecture is designed to handle the rest. Language instruction serves as a window into a systemic flaw in our modern approach to education. We have a cultural bias that only trusts knowledge we can consciously articulate and defend on a test. Ironically, the most robust skills you possess, your native language, your ability to walk, and your social intuition, were acquired through implicit systems that were never explicitly taught. The 20-minute trick works because it stops fighting the brain's design. If you provide the patterns in a context-rich environment, you allow the machine to finally do the job.